I'd like to welcome you all to this Holocaust exhibit. This is an annual event that happens here at Clarksburg School. It's become quite the fabric of our school community and the broader community to have this each year, to have our students dive into a unit of study that produces all of this great work. And they learn so much, and I know that they're so proud to share it with you tonight. And I'm super proud of all that they've done in the last many weeks to get ready for tonight. I also want to just thank Mr. Little, who organizes and facilitates this process every year. It is an incredible amount of work with many hours well beyond the school day. Lots of coordinating of efforts to bring lots of people here tonight. So I want to thank him as well for making this event happen. And there's plenty of staff that are here supporting this tonight, behind the scenes work that goes into an event like this. And I want to welcome and thank you all for being a part of this. We can't have an event if you're not here. So thanks for taking the time to come out tonight and to be here. And I want to thank all of our sponsors who are so generous and also helping with a night like tonight. We have a wonderful speaker who's back again. Inga, I haven't even said hello to you yet because I've been busy with meetings. But Inga, it's just so wonderful to see her again tonight. She was here last year. I was just enthralled with her whole speech last year, and I'm excited to hear what she has to bring us again tonight. I know that you want to hear from students and from Inga, so I'm going to stop talking right now and just say thank you. Welcome to everybody who's here tonight. Thank you for our sponsors and everyone. And I'm going to turn this over to Michael Little right now.
First up, thanks everybody for coming out. I want to share a quick story before we start. About 3 years ago, someone had told me that this work was no longer relevant, that it was past its time and it didn't need to be done anymore. You all, at Packed House, proved them completely wrong, so thank you very much. I appreciate it. This exhibit is a little different than anything we've ever done because if you followed some of the Facebook posts, you know that we had Raymond Fischler originally scheduled here. He heard about us through Mass Mocha. Mass Mocha got us in touch. Raymond wanted to come. He was a survivor of Krakow Plaza under a man called Amon Goth. And he wanted to come, and unfortunately he got sick, and 2 weeks later he was gone. So first part of tonight, we're going to do a memorial for Ray. We're going to read a little bit out of his book. And then we're going to bring Inga up. Here's the connection. There's two important connections. I'm going to let Inga talk about the second one. First one, Ray and Inga both tirelessly work to educate people about the Holocaust. Inga's here tonight after a very short rest from going to Germany on a tour. So thank you very much, Inga. Short notice, she decided she would come. I think she loves it here. People know her now because whenever we go somewhere, people stop her. So, Inga, thank you very much. I just want to say that our mission up here is to unite student scholarship with expert testimonial to bring the issues of the Holocaust, prejudice, discrimination to the forefront of our minds. In this world nowadays, which is very unsettled, this work is more important than ever. And I'm very pleased that for 14 years now, we've done this. 14 straight years. Every year, I get towards the end, I say, I'm never going to do this again. That's not true. I am going to do it again, and I'm going to keep going forever. So, and I just want you all to know that even though tonight we have an exhibit which is based on a survivor who has passed away, we still have the energy of Ray with us, and I firmly believe that this is a different exhibit in that it feels a bit more ghost-filled to me, in that Ray's not here. Inga's going to step in. She's going to do a phenomenal job like she always does. But in the context of things, I'm really proud of this group of students of mine because when Ray passed, it really took a lot out of us. And everybody was just kind of, oh, what are we going to do? And we were 2/3 through the work. And we had no idea what was going to happen. We had a meeting. It was short. Everybody said, let's push forward. And the first name that came up was, what about Inga? So, yeah, what about Inga? So I called her up, and here we are tonight. I want to say, too, that for Raymond and his life, I only talked to him on the phone several times, and I'm hoping, I could not get his family here tonight. It's just too close to everything that had happened. But we're hoping that we could take these boards on a tour down to New Jersey and present to his family in a synagogue or two down there. That would be the ideal capstone on our tremendous amount of work that my students did. I want to thank my sponsors first before we go much farther. I have Robert and Elaine Baum. They couldn't be with us tonight because unfortunately there's some health issues there too. And Robert and Elaine Baum provide the money for this school to go to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum every year for the past 13 years now. They gave money to this school without ever meeting me, without ever seeing any of the work that we did, and ever since then, they still give us the money every year, even though at one time it was distributed to 10 schools, South County. We're the last school standing that still is sponsored by Robert and Elaine Baum. They're not here tonight, but I really appreciate their support. We also have several other people that really help us. McLean Electric has been providing all sorts of stuff and support, supplies, hotel rooms, nonstop for the past probably 10 years. And I appreciate all their support. Mr. Blair at Midtown Tax and Bookkeeping, he has been with us for 5 or 6 years now. He's always happy to support our work. I know he's here somewhere. I really appreciate it, Bob. Everything, you can imagine how hard it is to raise money for Holocaust education. I always tell people it's not like we got a football team, and rah, rah, rah. It's not that. It doesn't work that way. So all these people who have always helped us, I appreciate it. We have Christo's Famous Pizza, who helps us, Mike Dowling's company, Wise Guy, and we have this great sound system that is lended to us by John LeClaire. We're going to start out tonight, we're going to do some short readings from Ray's book, a little bit of just key information to memorialize Ray. And like I said, it took a lot out of the students when Ray passed, but here we are, we kept going. We're going to keep doing this every single year. I'm going to bring up groups of students. They're going to give very short readings, and then Inga, you're going to come up and you're going to educate us on your experience and your experiences with Ray as well, because you both traveled together extensively in Europe. Okay, first up, we have from Chapter 1, Home. We have Ethan and Sean. Come on up.
I was born Abram Fischler on February 8, 1925 in Kazimierz, Poland, a town located between two rivers. It was a time when life was simple. Everything we could ever want was there. So there was no need to leave our tight-knit community. We were very close and looked forward to the times we could gather together, which occurred not just on special occasions, but almost every weekend. When I got up in the morning, one of my first thoughts was of how blessed I was to have such a loving and supportive family. I would start each day with a blessing, thanking God for that. I loved reading so much beyond the world of books, my homeless, my refugee. Although we did not have a lot of money, my parents would do anything to enhance their children's education and lives. We were successful because our parents encouraged us, we loved them, so it was important to make them proud of us.
The Jewish community in my town was like one large family, and we were constantly visiting each other. There were 8 of us, my parents, Sarah, Mendel, Lee, David, Womsky, and me. Despite our differences with our non-Jewish neighbors, we were lucky that until the war broke out, we generally got along. Anti-Semitism really started to surface a few years before the war. We all lived with the hope that there would be no war, but soon the information we received from the outside world told us that we had much to fear. Because we had a radio in our house, people would come to listen when Hitler made a speech. He screamed so loudly and spoke so much formal German that I couldn't understand a lot of it. On November 9th and 10th, 1938, German mobs attacked Jewish communities throughout Germany, Austria, and areas of Czechoslovakia that had recently been occupied by Germans. More than 1,200 synagogues were burned or destroyed. Nearly 100 Jews were killed, 30,000 Jews were thrown into concentration camps. 7,000 Jewish businesses were destroyed, and thousands for Jewish homes in Germany were looted and ransacked. This event was called Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass, because the streets were covered with broken glass from the homes and businesses that were destroyed. On September 11th, 1939, as Germany invaded Poland, we thought somehow we would be safe in our homes and in our towns. We soon learned that there was no safe haven anywhere.
We have chapter 2, the occupation with Aaron and Travis. Come on up, guys.
On September 1st, 1939, Germany attacked Poland without any warning. I was awakened at about 4:30 a.m. by the incredible roar of low-flying planes. I remember the planes were so low that I could see the pilots. To my horror, I saw swastikas on the plane's wings. I knew immediately that we were at war. The war we each feared and worried about was here. I could not imagine what was to come next for my family, my community, and the rest of the world. As Jews, we had much to fear. While Germany was destroying the Polish army, the Russian army occupied eastern Poland. We Jews were trapped. The battlefield was a horrible sight, filled with the anguished cries of the wounded and the scent of death. War had come to the streets of my town. The Germans supplied us with vodka because of the overwhelming stench of the decaying flesh. From then on, laws pertaining to Jews were passed daily. We had to wear yellow star armbands. We were not allowed to go to school. We had to abide by curfew. We had to supply man-forced labor, which consisted of working in our town's sugar refinery. We shoveled snow, we washed German vehicles, and moved heavy furniture and heavy safes in the building taken over by the German government. The Nazis were very shrewd. They had a systematic way of organizing the destruction of the Jews. Horrifying stories began to circulate through our community with alarming frequency about atrocities being committed at Treblinka, Auschwitz, and other concentration camps. But we didn't want to believe them. After all, no one with a clear mind could imagine such unbelievable events or anticipate what was going to happen next. Shortly afterward, the Jewish community was liquidated. From that,
all we could hope for was a miracle that I knew would never happen. I had seen too much to think otherwise. It was impossible to find a hiding place for all of my family together, so we had to split up. I remember my mother, always the nerder, making packages for everyone with food and other things we would need. The night we said goodbye to each other, we tried to remain calm. But when my youngest brother, Moshe, who was 7 years old, came to me and asked me to help him put on a tie, I yelled at him and said it was not a wedding. I feel so badly that was the last thing we talked about. It still haunts me. At least I remembered that the last thing I did before I left the house was kiss and hug him goodbye. I'd like to believe that on his last night on earth, he was thinking about that hugging and kiss rather than being shouted at by his older brother. I'll never know. The liquidation had begun. The Germans shot my grandfather immediately. Following his death, I was so sad and the world seems empty without him. Later, I was stunned to learn that in one day, Leah, David, Moshe, and my mother were gone. And I had no idea if my brother, Mendel, and my father were safe. That night, Sarah and I cried all night, our grief mixing with our terror and fear that we would be the next to be found killed. More than anything, my mother's last words to me when we parted kept coming back to me. If you should survive, go to America to my sister and tell the world what they did to us.
We have 4 students that will read from Then We Were Four: Molly, Lily, Katrina, and Maya. Come on up.
The Nazis made no secret of the fact that they would shoot the entire family of anyone who dared to hide Jews. The Germans were angry that so many Jews had gone into hiding. Out of the 600 Jews now living in the town, 100 or so having come from other towns, they caught or killed about 180 to 190. It was an embarrassment to them that they couldn't report that all the Jews had been liquidated. Each day I lived with the threat of being caught and killed. More than a week after the liquidation began, the Germans took the 324 Jews from the school and told them that they were being transported to the train station to be relocated from there. They were taken by horses and buggies, driven by Poles whom the Germans had coerced. Later, they were taken to the woods where they were shot and killed 15 at a time. I shudder to think about the fate of the people murdered that day, how terrified they must have been waiting for their turn to be shot. The work was brutal. We would leave the barracks at 5:30 a.m. and would work until 6 p.m. I used to be so tired that I would sometimes fall asleep standing up bleeding on my shovel. The barracks complex and plaza was enormous. Some of the barracks held 500 to 750 people. We slept in 3-tier bunks. The tiers were wooden platforms with a little straw, a sheet that I still had from home, and a woolen blanket that the Germans supplied. In 1944, Plazow changed from being a labor camp to a concentration camp. The Germans used Plazow as a dumping ground for the old and the sick, while the children were swept up in the liquidation of the ghetto. Once Jews were transported to Plazow, their final destination was often a mass grave after being stripped and shot. The Nazis had no regard for human life nor any respect for the dead. Everything they did was meant to diminish us. In February 1943, we got a new camp commandant, Amon Goeth, and he became our worst nightmare.
Goeth was such an evil, vicious person that sometimes he would kill people for no reason. Almost no one escaped their fate once Goeth decided to execute them. One of our tasks was to rip apart clothing that was taken from those who had been shot and killed to look for money and jewelry. Many who were punished for any reason, even minor occurrences, were sent to work in the quarry. Very few survived because the work was brutal. They were beaten and they were given very little food. Once we were all called to a roll call after work, we noticed that there were many tables lined up and the number of guards had been increased. After we were all assembled, Goeth selected more than 200 women and made them strip from the waist down. They then had to lie down on the table with their heads on. They then had to lay down with their heads on the table, and they were each given 25 to 50 lashes, supposedly for underperforming.
We began to hear horrible stories from the world outside of the camp of people being shot and gassed to death. I had no doubt people were being murdered because I saw it with my own eyes, but I never believed the extent of what was actually going on. Hunger prevailed, but I was able to get more food for my people by making uniforms for the Germans and the guards. One day, 40 men were murdered for a mere few loaves of bread that they tried to smuggle in from outside Plazow. In spring of 1944, frequent transports were coming from and going to Plazow. There were transports with Jews from Hungary that stopped on the way to Auschwitz, which was about 35 miles away. I recall that a transport of about 2,000 women was brought to Plazow. Their heads were shaved and they were wearing striped uniforms. Despite that, some of them were so beautiful. They didn't know that in a day or two their destination was Auschwitz and that they would likely be sent to gas chambers.
Just before them, there were two, Gabby, Emma, and Emily.
Plazow, our personal hell on earth, was finally closed, but now a new hell awaited us. We were not told where we were going, only that we were leaving permanently in order to start marching. When we began the march to Auschwitz, every one of us was given some bread. We marched through Sunday night and the whole day Monday. Close to midnight on the 14th of January, 1945, we arrived at Auschwitz. We were greeted by the sign, Arbeit macht frei, work makes one free. Auschwitz was a death camp. I was overwhelmed by the terrible stench of burned human flesh and the sight of piles of skeletons. The Germans were doing everything to erase any signs of their crimes and to eliminate as many of their witnesses as possible. The Germans did not want any witnesses to their atrocities to survive, so our outlook was very bleak. After midnight, we were taken to the showers. We had heard rumors about the gassings, so we turned our heads toward the shower heads in fear, not knowing if water or poison gas would pour over us. To our relief, water came raining down.
Luckily, our stay at Auschwitz only lasted 4 days.
On January 18th, 60,000 inmates left Auschwitz on a death march in groups of 3,000 each. We were each given a loaf of bread and a woolen blanket. It was a cold, beautiful, sunny day, and the ground was covered with snow. We marched all night through an incredibly windy blizzard, traveling south 40 to 45 miles towards Gliwice, Poland, a sub-camp of Auschwitz near the border of Czechoslovakia. I remember thinking if the whole world had forgotten about us, or if anyone cared about us Jews who were being persecuted beyond human comprehension. The following day, we arrived at a camp. They took away our leather shoes and gave us wooden shoes. 8 of us were crammed into a little room the size of a small closet. The following evening, we were herded into open freight train cars. At that time, we numbered about 3,000, with 100 of us in each open car. It was snowing and brutally cold again. We used our blankets to cover our thin striped uniforms, which gave us minimal coverage and warmth.
Our blankets and light clothing were inadequate against the wind and snow that ripped through the car. One advantage of being packed so tightly in the open car, however, was that our body heat warmed us to a certain degree. When we traveled through Czechoslovakia, we were pleased that some people responded to our plea by throwing us food. We had to use enormous restraint to limit ourselves to a meager piece of bread daily, since we did not know when we would be on the train. When any of the prisoners died, we threw the body off the train to let the rest of the world know what was happening to us. Our hearts were bleeding, wondering why some people lived beautifully normal lives, while just because we were Jewish, we had to suffer like this. Why did they do this to us? We were constantly haunted by not knowing where we were being taken. People were dying of starvation because some prisoners were so malnourished from the previous experiences that they simply had no chance to survive. A German guard said to me, "I have an order to take you into the woods to kill you, but the war is almost over, so get off the truck and run away." Now what would happen next?
Post-war adjustment.
My father and I left the barn on May 9th, 1945. We were finally able to taste freedom. We did not have to worry about a guard walking behind us with a gun on his shoulder, ready to shoot us at any time. As wonderful as it was to be free, there was not much else to celebrate. I looked at my father in his striped prisoner's uniform. He was so pitifully thin, and I looked so tired. Reality set in. I had no illusions about any of my family members having survived, except perhaps my brother. We realized the enormous losses that we had sustained. 5 and likely 6 of us were gone forever. The rage and sorrow of this certainly was overwhelming. We had no home to return to and no family waiting for us. Where could we go? Along the way, the roads were lined with German civilian onlookers. All they kept saying was, "We did not know." Again and again, wherever we went, German civilians were lining the roads, saying the same as before, "We did not know."
We collected close to 100 bodies. The American governor forced all the German administrators to bury these victims in caskets so that they could have an appropriate funeral and burial. The governor wanted them to see with their own eyes what the country had done, and still their response was, "We did not know." We got as far as the Polish border when we heard about the survivors who had returned and were killed by Poles. Unfortunately, there were some Poles who wanted a Poland free of Jews. That was a very dark period in Polish history and Polish-Jewish relations. I had many German friends and realized that not all Germans were guilty, especially the younger ones.
Chapter 6, Life Begins Anew, Anastasia and Jacob.
the mid-July 1949, along with about 1,200 very excited, very nervous Holocaust survivors, journey for America. Finally, we were on our way to a new land and a new life. My youth had been snatched away from me, but what I had experienced during the war, I had seen too much to ever view the stars with such innocence and pure joy again. My first impression of America, though, was awe and wonder. The non-stop sound and light show of colors was mesmerizing and made me wonder if anyone slept here. Presiding over the spectacle was the majestic Statue of Liberty. We had all seen pictures and heard of this landmark, but no words or pictures could do her justice. We knew that the sight of Lady Liberty actually greeting us meant our nightmare was over.
A few months later, after I was living in my own apartment, my father came to visit because his immigration papers had finally come through. I was working full-time, so he was on his own during the day. After spending much time investigating what life was like in Manhattan, my father decided that he was told to make another drastic change in his life. He settled in Rosenheim, Germany, where he already established a successful business. The German government was generous and compassionate to survivors, so he had a very decent quality of life. While I thoroughly enjoyed the Manhattan nightlife, and I had plenty of dates, there was an emptiness to my life. Perhaps it was time to think about settling down. Through connections I had, I met a woman named Rhoda. She eventually agreed to go out with me, and the rest is history. Not long afterward, I met Rhoda's parents who lived in North Adams, Massachusetts. Both of her parents were born in Europe, and I immediately felt a close connection to them. They were wonderful people and reminded me of the people from my hometown in Poland. We got married in North Adams on August 3rd, 1958, the happiest day of my life. Eventually, I realized that my mission was to grab every opportunity that comes my way to share my history so that the Holocaust is not forgotten. One day, in the not too distant future, there will be no survivor to tell their stories. So it's imperative that I and others like me share their Holocaust experience so that no one can ever doubt the Holocaust happened.
All right, let's hear it for those Clarksburg students. Yeah. When they found out they had to read in front of everybody, it made my life a little more tougher, if you can imagine that. Inga Auerbacher is back for the third time up here in Clarksburg, and she's a remarkable Holocaust speaker. She travels the world over, and if you are in any Holocaust circles or have any discussions about survivors, Inga's name a lot of times comes up, and it's with tremendous respect and gratitude and honor. So I'm really, really pleased that she's here. Inga's had many, many, many awards. Ellis Island Medal of Honor together with Hillary Clinton and John Glenn. Honorary Doctorate of Humane Letters from Long Island University together with David Dinking, first black mayor of New York City. Honor Doctor from Sioux Falls University in South Dakota. She is a woman of distinction from the New York State Senate. 2 prestigious awards from Germany, including one from the President. Honorary member of the Blackfeet Nation of Montana. And coming up very shortly, she'll be speaking in front of the United Nations. And of course, when you do a monumental event like that, the first place you should stop is Clarksburg. I'm greatly in debt to Inga for coming up here, for agreeing to do this exhibit with us. My students thank you, the community thanks you, and Holocaust education thanks you. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Inga Auerbacher. Just before we get started, we have a card here for Inga from classmates. My classmates is for you. And then we have one from our famous photographer. Who's that nice lady with the camera? That's Erica. She's right over there. This is from Erica. This is for you. Yes. Yeah.
Well, anyway.
much, everybody, for coming. But hey, I'm not the great. I'm just, as my mother would call me, Ingela. I wish somebody would call me that again. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight, and especially Mr. Little. You deserve a halo, absolutely. We need people like you, and you will be the ambassadors to freedom and to peace in the future, to carry on this story. You have the power, and use it. I'm also grateful to the people who made this possible, the sponsors, and especially also Mr. Little's cousin, Jimmy, who is he's the savior of my life here, because he picks me up all the time in Albany and brings me here. Jimmy, take a bow. And of course, I'm deeply saddened of the death of Raymond. I met Raymond around the year 2000 when we were both on a trip for the gathering of students, the peace parade there, to go to the Holocaust places in Poland, March of the Living. And then we spent 1 week in Poland to see all the major concentration camps, some of the places where people were shot in the woods, terrible stories. And then we were happy to go to Israel for a week to see life again after so much death. And nobody can fit the shoes of somebody like that, but I dedicate this lecture to Raymond, and I hope I do him justice. My deepest sympathy to the whole family. We love you, and we will always remember you for being the person that you are. I met his wife also, actually only on the phone, but I'm saddened by this, that I'm standing before you instead of him. But I think he's looking down and see if we're doing a good job. And you kids did a good job, and especially Mr. Little, who, he's just a genius. What can you do? Stand up. You gotta take it off. You made only one statement that was wrong. I wasn't only in Germany, twice in Germany. Just the last month, I was in Panama City. I was in Norway, and so it goes. And now I'm here, and I'm very happy to be with you today. Mississippi too. I want to take you today on a journey of my life from the time I was close to 10 and afterwards, the first 10 years of Nazi Europe, but then what happened a little bit after the war, which is equally important. And we will take a journey of these years. So let's pack up our bags and go on this journey together. I think we might need less light. Can we turn off some of the lights so you can see? And you're going to be my clicker. What's your name? Well, he will save my life here. Okay, let's go. Okay, next, please. Yeah, this good. Next. When I say next, you do it. Thanks. I was born on December 31, 1934, in a little village in southwestern Germany called Kippenheim. Yeah, I know how old I am. You don't have to figure this out. My birthday is coming this month, 84 years young. And I was the last Jewish child born in this village of about 2,000 people, 60 Jewish families. And we lived very happily together. The houses were next to each other. But we had our own little community too. When the Christians went to their church on Sunday, we went to our synagogue on Saturday. That was really the only big difference. It wasn't big, it was small. Next. Here's the house I'm born in. The house is now almost 300 years old. And I'll tell you just a quick story. I just was in Kippenheim, and the owners of the house, they have it at least 80 years, almost as long as we had it. We had it way over 100 years. I was born in that house. When you look on the second floor, those two windows, that's where I was born. But the owners of the house said, I'm very good friends with them today, although we sold the house very quickly in 1939. We were running for our lives, literally. And they said, why don't you come and stay at least 1 or 2 nights in the house where you were born? And I did. In fact, it's such a big house, I hardly found my way. So when you look on the left side, I know the right side, but the left side, then there's a courtyard in the middle. One of those windows, that's where I slept for 2 nights. And it was kind of strange. The first night, I could hear only the glass crashing, crystalline, but I fell asleep quite soundly. And the second night, I got used to it. I said, my God, this is really like a dream for me. And the family was very kind. They brought me breakfast when I had to go to Oslo to fly out very early. They got up like 4 o'clock in the morning for me. So it was a very pleasant situation. Even a very big newspaper, the Bild magazine, did a whole story on this. They thought this was really cool, as they put it. Okay, next. My father was a textile merchant. We weren't millionaires, we were comfortable, and I was an only child. And you see, he had already a car, and that was so special in those days. So when he came to propose to my mother, he brought this shiny black car. And she could, of course, she could tell her friends, oh, my beau has a car. And when he proposed, and actually he proposed the same day they met, they were introduced, and she said yes. And I don't know, did she say yes to the car? Or but they were happily married, 54 happy years. So I guess it wasn't just the car. Next. And I remained an only child. My father was a soldier in World War I. He was wounded very badly in his right shoulder, and he received the Iron Cross. He was a very proud German, to tell you the truth. In fact, when my first book came out, now I have 6, he asked me, am I in your book? I said, yes. Your soldier picture is in the book, a whole page. So he said, that's good. Can you imagine? Yes, we were proud Germans. Jewish people lived in Germany for more than 1,000 years. The only difference was that we believe in the Old Testament, and the Christians, I don't think I want to be that. You have to have 2 testaments. It's enough one for me. I feel sorry for you that you have to study so hard. Next. Here I am in my sandbox, already thinking of becoming a scientist. I was a chemist for 38 years in medical research and clinical work. That was my place of work, and that's how I made my living. So it wasn't writing, that's just a hobby with me, but I was a scientist for 38 years. Next. Here's a wonderful excursion to the Black Forest, which was very nearby. And you see, I'm wearing the traditional little dress, the dirndl dress. When you go to a German restaurant, you see the waitresses wearing that same outfit. And my parents gave me a very German name, Inge. It was very popular in those days, in the 30s. either Ingrid, Ingeborg, but I found out in Norway, Inge, the way my name is pronounced and written I-N-G-E, is a man's name. But Inga, I guess it's the girl's name, and I get many times letters, Mr. Inge Auerbach. So now I know why. The mystery is solved. Next. Here I am in front of a special tower. It has a story. In the house before my great-great-grandfather bought, they lived a tailor. And the son went to England and was taken in by a German tailor shop. And that tailor shop became one of the most famous tailor shops of all of London. They made the uniforms for the guards and all these special things. And he was called the King of Fashion. His name, and he came back to Germany and brought money there to the poor people, also bread on his name day. He opened up a hospital, which was no longer in use when I was born, and an orphanage in the Black Forest, which is now a school. And to honor him, they built this little tower, and they knighted him, and there's a plaque in front of the house that he was born in that house. Today, there's a plaque right next to him. I think mine is more shiny and nicer. That I'm also born in the same house, except his is there for a lot longer years than mine. So I'm very proud to be born in a house that has very good karma. The time is now 1938 when everything changed. It was just before Crystal Night, the night of broken glass. And here you have my grandparents, my mother's parents. I never knew my father's parents. They had died years before he got married. And my parents and myself. Now you see, my grandfather has his head covered. I came from a modern Orthodox family where men and boys have to keep their head covered to honor God. I know in the Christian faith you have to take your hat off, but except the Pope and the cardinals, who also have this little hat on top, this little beanie on top. And so anyway, so we were quite religious in a modern way though. Unfortunately, I'm not quite as religious anymore, but I keep my faith. And one thing is very special here, the doll. I had a doll that my grandmother gave me when I was 2 years old. And I named her Marlena, according to the famous movie star Marlene Dietrich. I don't know if anybody, have you heard that name? Oh, a few, but for you kids. Marlene Dietrich was a very famous movie star, international. Sort of like Britney Spears or something like that. A sex symbol. Blue eyes, blonde hair, my doll looked like that. And when I got her, my mother had a lot of movies. She loved movie stars. So she had these albums, and I pointed one out to her. Who is that lady? And she said, that's Marlene Dietrich. And that's how the name stuck to my doll. And she would be the only thing that would survive my years in the concentration camp. And later I gave her some years ago to the Holocaust Museum in Washington. Unfortunately, she is also an old lady now, like me, and she's a little bit more brittle than I am. And they put her away in a box in safekeeping. So they did show her for a while, but she's not being shown right now, but in good care. And some years ago also I showed these pictures. In Germany, I speak German. Still in Germany, you have to speak German if you speak in a school. Their English is not good enough, but I'm still perfect in German. And they said, you have a special doll. I said, yeah, for me she was special. Well, during the 36 Olympics, they they put out this doll with a special hairdo with the name Inge. It was a very German name. So we made a film about that, the Olympic doll, for the about the Hitler Olympics in 1936. Even a doll was produced at that time. So I had actually the Hitler doll, so to speak. Next. We had a beautiful synagogue, and in one day, November 10th, now the riots, what we call Crystal Night, the night of broken glass, happened 2 days, November 9th and 10th, 1938, in Germany and in Austria, the first major riot against the Jewish people. By us, it happened on November 10th. My grandfather had gone to the synagogue in the morning. They had visited us to say his morning prayers, and he was arrested and sent to the Dachau concentration camp. The police came to our house and arrested my father, even though he had the Iron Cross and had been a soldier fighting for the Germans. We were not cowards. For instance, my grandmother was one out of 14 children. Yes, they had a lot in those days. She had 4 brothers in World War I, and 2 died for Germany, and then they killed some of the others. Next. This was the interior of our beautiful synagogue. We didn't have a rabbi. Usually you have a rabbi in the cantor because most of us prayers are sung. But in this case, we only had a cantor who did both. And all these chandeliers. It was a beautiful synagogue. It changed in one day. Next. They started to burn it because most of the synagogues in Austria and Germany were burned to the ground. But here they couldn't because there were Christian houses nearby. But they ransacked the whole place. And even here, you have people watching. That is very important. Even a child is watching. Elie Wiesel says, if you're even watching, if you're the bystander, you're equally guilty to the people doing these terrible deeds. And a lot, unfortunately, were watching. Now, the doctor who delivered me is about choices in life. That, to me, is very important. The doctor who delivered me was not Jewish. You always think all doctors are Jewish. Well, he wasn't. Not only that, he already belonged to the SS, the stormtroopers. He came to my mother's bedside. She had a very bad pregnancy in his uniform. And he was good to the Jewish people. He did a lot of work for them. Later on, he got involved, most likely in euthanasia, killing people with mental and physical disabilities. And he was put in jail for many years for that. So in life, this is something to remember. You have choices to be a good person or to go along with a mad crowd and become a bad person. Forgiveness to me means nothing. When something has been done, the person is dead. We'll go into it later if you have a question about that. But you have choices in life. Stay a good person and don't follow the crowd. And this is the problem in Germany today, by the way. One of the reasons I went, but 2 times, first to my mother's background, to village, and to my own. Because the right-wingers are coming up again. There's danger at the door. And again they say, oh, the Jews. There are hardly any Jews in Germany today. They don't like the immigrants. They don't like anybody. And I pleaded with them, saying no, nein, to these new people, to these right-wingers who are getting quite a bit of power today. Quite a bit. And that's one of the reasons I went over there, because one can do something, and to alert them, you know, those were the signs in the 30s, and we didn't heed those signs. Today, we must heed those signs. Next. For many years, the synagogue looked like this. Now, all the houses, in the Jewish houses, all the windows were broken. And we had to pay for the damage. I remember standing in the dining room of my house, and glass all over the place. That's why it's called Crystal Night, because of those crystals, the glass shining. And one of the hoodlums looked through the window. He said, look, the chandelier's still hanging. We have to get that one. Threw a big rock through the broken window and almost hit me. My mother just pulled me away, And we saved ourselves in the backyard shed. The house was really quite big, a big courtyard in the middle, and they kept on banging on the door, but they didn't come inside. And we stayed there a whole day, just till midnight, and then we went to our neighbors, Jewish neighbors, whose house was also ransacked, and stayed with them. All the men and boys from the age of 16 were sent away to concentration camps. In our area, it was Dachau. In some other areas, it was Buchenwald. So in Austria and in Germany, this was the beginning. And again, I see signs over there today. God forbid they will get to that point. God forbid. All over the world, it seems like. Even in America, we have signs of things happening. Now, I took that picture on my first trip back to Germany some years ago. And this is what the synagogue looked like, a little hut there, a little building, and was used as a storage area for animal feed, especially pig food. And you know, Jews do not eat pork, neither do Muslims, so we have that in common. Next. And today the synagogue has been rebuilt like it looked in the how it was, except the tablets on top do not have any Hebrew lettering. It is no longer a place where people pray. It is a symbol. Once Jewish people lived among us, and so the building is used for cultural things, not only Jewish, other things. They even had something about Muslim religion, and it's very famous. And sits right in the middle of the village, and I would say the two most beautiful buildings in the village are the former synagogue. It's no longer a synagogue, it's a symbol, and the town hall. Next. Somehow they permitted those men to come home again after a few weeks from Dachau. We didn't even know where they were. They came home broken in spirit and in body. And they told of the terrible things that happened to them. They had to give up all their clothing and wear those blue and white striped uniforms, stand at attention for hours in the bitter cold in Dachau, which is near Munich. At this time of the year, it can be very cold. And if somebody even wanted to blow their nose, they were hosed out with ice cold water. And that happened to my father a few times. And they told him, oh, you can throw away your iron cross. You're just a piece of garbage for us. Well, up to then, we didn't want to leave Germany, but it was an eye-opener when they came home again. And we tried, but all the doors to the free world were closing very rapidly. We lived so close to France. I was just now a few days in Strasbourg. My father did an apprenticeship in Strasbourg. He used to come home on his bicycle. That's how close it was. Switzerland had their doors closed. We tried to get to America. We had a number that would probably get us in here maybe 10 years. And we couldn't believe it. How could this happen? And we really didn't want to leave. But it was an absolute necessity. And we sold this house at a comparatively cheap price, but as the people said, well, we bought the house and we paid the price. Yes, of course, they got a good deal, but it was okay for us because we were running literally for our lives. And we moved in with my grandparents who lived about 200 miles away, and even smaller village. But the village is part of Göppingen. When you look on the map, you have Stuttgart, and you have Göppingen, and then you have Ulm, where Albert Einstein was born. And I would say this village was at one time 40% Jewish, but they had the permission to settle there, live separately. But around 1850, they moved away to America to find a better life, or moved to the bigger cities and industrialized those cities. And here you have the Jewish area. About 1850, everybody, you know, almost it was empty of Jewish people except my family. The Lauchheimer family became quite prominent here in America. They stayed. And I had only Christian friends here. And I would say, here in that village, I felt very much at home. The Christians, all, for the most part, were very nice to us, to my parents and grandparents. And the children all played with me. I had a lot of friends. I still have some friends today. We would walk up and down this hill, which was at one time the Jewish area, singing the songs of the day, which were many times Nazi songs. We didn't even know what we were singing. Something interesting here, when you look on the left side, one of the last houses, little house, was a bakery. That bakery belonged to Albert Einstein's great-grandparents. And for sure, he came and walked that hill. And I always wanted to meet him because I was a nerdy kid. I wanted to be a scientist. And we didn't even know where he lived. I don't know, nobody could tell us when we went to Princeton. It's an opportunity I really feel bad about because I'm the only Jewish child who came back from any of the transports that started in Stuttgart. I'm the only child who survived in the state of Württemberg, who was transported to any of the camps from Stuttgart. So I'm sure he would have seen me. Very sad, and I never met him. He was my hero. Next. This was my grandparents' house, still standing. It was renovated. We sold it after the war. They took it away when my grandmother was sent away, but we got the house back. My grandfather was a cattle dealer. As for most people in those days, Jewish people, that's what they were allowed to do, because they were not taken into the unions and things like that. So they had little shops or were cattle dealers in those little villages. And the cows were in the house. Now, you see the stable, the black door, that's where my grandpa had his cows. There were never more than 2-3 cows. And I would go down to the stable, and he put me on the cows. So for me, agricultural life is a good thing. So when I go to a big place like in Montana where they have these huge areas with the cows, and I want to go into the stable and smell that again. It brings back good memories, not bad. So here's my grandparents. Here's my best friend, Elizabeth, who just passed away too a few years ago. She was my first ever girlfriend, and to the end, even her daughter came to see me when I spoke there. And again, I have my doll with me. Everybody knew about Marlene, everybody. Here, my grandfather died soon after coming out of Dachau. He was the last Jew to be buried in the Jewish cemetery. He has a special grave, a lying down stone, because we didn't want his grave to be desecrated, because many of the Jewish cemeteries were desecrated. The stones were toppled, but nothing happened to it. Certainly, it is very deep in the earth today, but you can see still the plate on top. These pictures are very, very special, and it's the deportation of the Jews from the state of Baden, my home state, where it started in 1940. The whole state of Baden deported all Jewish people to Gurs, Camp de Gurs, G-U-R-S. Probably many of you have never heard of it. It's on the Spanish-French border, very far away. Everybody had to go. Had we still lived there, we would have been deported. And this was in October 1940. And these pictures are very rare because there are very few pictures around of the deportation of the Jews from Germany. You only had around 500,000 Jews living in Germany. When I asked students, how many do you think lived in Germany? They said, oh, millions, millions. It's not true. Not very many compared to Poland, at least 3 million, Hungary, etc. So, and what's interesting here is, for instance, these are part of my family, extended family, being deported. That little boy at the end, that family did survive with great difficulty. He just came home from school. He has his school bag. He's holding his school bag. But what's really, really interesting here is the girl watching. Now we asked her, I heard she was still alive. Must be quite old by now. What did you think as your friends are being taken away? Well, I just wanted to look. And again, the onlookers, the bystanders, are guilty as much as the ones doing this terrible deed. Certainly she was a young girl, but there were many other bystanders, as you can see next. They gave them very little time to prepare. These pictures are not the best, but we are so happy to have gotten them. Here's one of my extended relatives to a distant cousin. He didn't make it. He was sent to Auschwitz. The route was Gurs, Rissal, Drancy, Auschwitz. And most of them landed up there. Here, the whole town is watching. You can see even the cow. Next. And here we asked the daughter of this man, we knew whom he was. He said, that was your father. She said, no. He said he was an elegant man. That couldn't be my father. He would never travel with a rope around his suitcase. That's not very nice. But he just took something, whatever they had, and they were deported within an hour or so. And unfortunately, he did not make it either. Next. Now the time is 1941. This was 41. I'm still safe. But school had to start. And there was only one school that I was allowed to go to in the state of Württemberg. Now, there are two states in Baden, where I was born. My mother was born in Württemberg. Those two states hated each other, but today they are one. Baden-Württemberg is one state, very prosperous. By the way, Germany is extremely prosperous. And I'm a little scared there because it could be a problem in the world. Who knows what will be. I mean, the people I met there were very nice, and I couldn't believe these nice people. What happened? Why could they become so bad? It's a puzzle to me, because I have many, many friends in Germany today. Many. And also it's time to go to school. Only one school in the capital of Württemberg, in Stuttgart. I had to get special permission to go to that school. First, my father took me on a bicycle to the train station. We were not allowed to use the bus, and then go to the school. Next. All the children from that state had to go to that, all the Jewish children. Here's one of the classrooms. Next. And we had to wear the yellow star, 41. Everybody from the age of 6 on in Germany and in Austria had to wear this star. And I still have mine. I can show it to you later because I don't want to stop right now. It looked exactly like this. Came from the yellow cloth. And you had to cut it out. It was very flimsy cloth. And you had to sew it on your left side over your heart. You couldn't be caught walking outside without that star. And we had to pay for that, as we had to pay for the damage of the broken glass. Everything had to be paid for. Next. Later on, it's about what I look like. Next. And later on, my parents had to do slave labor, and I had to go all by myself as a 6-year-old by train to go to school. And my father told me, try to sit in such a way that you can naturally cover up your star. I'm 6 years old, I'm a little kid. And lean against the left window. And I tried to do that. I was quite brave in those days. And I remember one Christian woman who walked by me, and as she left a little bag with rolls in it, probably her lunch for the day, and walked away. And here, this woman touched me to my soul and heart. She wanted to do something for that little Jewish child. And to me, she still remains anonymous. She didn't have a name. But wherever I go and speak, whether it's New Zealand or Mexico, wherever it is, I talk about this woman without a name. I know she's looking down from above and saying, that little Jewish kid never forgot me, and I did not forget her. Had more people done something, maybe this whole thing wouldn't have come to that point. So don't just be a bystander. You never know how you touch somebody else with even a small deed. For me, it was a very big deed. She probably could have gotten killed had she been caught, but she did it. She was not going to be a bystander in this. Very important. Now, the transports begin here in 1941. The school was closed after 6 months. I never finished my first grade. I lost altogether in my life 8 years of schooling, 8 years. But I did go to college. And here, then the transports began. Here, we got an order for transport, and my grandmother had it, and my father, who had been an alumnus already of such a camp, wrote to the Gestapo, the secret police, to plead with them. He's a disabled war veteran. He had a shoulder, a bullet, a shrapnel bullet, caught his right shoulder, and he would never be able to raise his right arm. He was a disabled war veteran, highly decorated. And somehow it worked for us, but not my grandmother. And the school closed, and almost all the children went on that transport to Riga, where they, excuse me, could you stop with your cell phone? Thank you. And then we were, so almost all the children were sent to to Riga, where they was herded into the forest and shot. Had I been on that transport, I would be in one of those mass graves. And I went to that place some years ago, to Riga, and I saw the forest. Beautiful forest, the birds were chirping. This is in Latvia. And then you come into a field with jagged rocks, and you walk up a hill, and there are 52 mass graves. I went past maybe 2 or 3 of them. I had enough. Each had at least 1,000 people, between 50,000 and maybe more, were in that one forest alone. And for all intents and purposes, I should have been in one of those graves. And some children were still alive. We had to leave our house. Were thrown out. They took it, leave the keys on the table. It's no longer your house. The grandmother was gone. She owned it. Out. And we were housed in Jewish houses. Very slummy area. Here are still some of the children alive at that time. And as an example, only the one with the striped hat would survive. All those children were eventually killed. Then, in 1942, in August, the report came again, the order. But this time we couldn't do anything. And here my number was 408. This is the first page of my order for transfer. It was at least 6 pages long, and the Holocaust Museum in Washington took a picture of this, exactly what it looks like today, but there were 6 pages. Take along good shoes, a kerchief, a duffel bag, a blanket, and metal dishes. And I was the youngest in the transport of close to 1,200 people. I was 7 years old. My number actually was Roman numeral 13-1-4-8. 13, Roman numeral meant Theresienstadt or Terezin in Czechoslovakia. Now it's called the Czech Republic. Next. And this is how a transport transpired. We did not have any cameras, so there are no pictures. But a friend of mine drew some pictures according to some of the writing that I had. And we had to go to a school gymnasium, something like here, a little smaller. Each town would gather the people, open everything on tables. And one of the guards saw that I had a little Dutch violin, and he ripped it from me and said, "You won't need this where you're going." I didn't know. And then he saw my doll, and he took her from me. And and she looked inside, he looked inside her hollow body, and searched, and I didn't hide anything, and he gave me back my doll because I really carried on. I was not going to let him have my doll. Yes, next. And we came to Stuttgart, the main gathering place, and these are real pictures of a film they took of my grandmother's transport, but only a few months later, I would be in the same two halls, and there is a woman, if you look in the middle, going up, she's sort of tilted, can't show it to you here. It looks like my grandmother, but I can't swear to it, I cannot. But we were in the same rooms only a few months later. This was the transport to Riga. Next. They actually made a film of that. When you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, right next to the cattle cars, you can see that little film, Deportation from Stuttgart. In the morning, we had to get our food in our little metal dishes. Next. We were there a few days waiting for the train. Next. Everybody in Germany had an ID, and we had a J on it. And by us it was stamped umgesiedelt, meaning we settled. 22nd of August, 1942. I went somewhere. Now you have a lot of Holocaust deniers today, and you know, there's so much proof. How can they deny something that has so much proof? Even myself, I have enough proof to prove the point. I was sent away because I was Jewish. Next. We were on a train. It was still a passenger train, but very crowded. And the SS, the stormtroopers, were riding with us about a day and a half to get there. We arrived in a little town called Bolshevitz, and we were told in Czechoslovakia, leave everything behind except your metal dishes, a bedroll, and a little duffel bag. And we were told to march. We had many old people on that transport who couldn't walk the 2 kilometers to get to the camp, and they were lying already by the wayside. Next. We are marching the camp, and they were beating us, and my parents put me between them that I should not be beaten. The same thing. Next. Marching, it was broad daylight, and these pictures were taken, somebody maybe looking out the window. I got these from an archive, but they were from the transports going to Terezin. Next. Going into the camp. Next. And we arrive in an actual little fortress town. Terezin was built by Emperor Joseph II in memory of his mother Maria Theresa. And it was a fortress town which was never really used. The poor people lived there. And in the late 18th century it was built. And by the way, Maria Theresa, the empress, was a terrible anti-Semite besides. But she had been dead a long time before that. And it was a perfect place for them to use because it was surrounded by brick walls, barbed wire, and wooden fences. And people went there from Germany, mostly Czech. Eventually Danes came, the ones who were not caught, but they were under special protection by the Danish king. He stood up for the Danes. That's something very special story in history, and from other countries too. We were a total of about 140,000 people. The camp opened up 1941, end of 1941, and it was finished by 45 when the war ended. I was there from August 42 until the summer of 45, when we were liberated by the Soviet or Russian army. Next. It was like a holding area, a place where you hold like animals before you kill them. And it was a special place where you put the intelligentsia of all of Europe. The best writers, the best musicians, the best doctors, the best of everything was sent there. Because they wanted to show the world, oh, all these intelligent people, they're in one place, and we're not doing anything to them. They are in one place, but that's it. But the next place was Auschwitz. Also, they were building gas chambers already. They were never in use, never completed. But Eichmann, who was in charge of everything came sometimes there, and I actually saw him. I know he was there because I have proof. I met somebody who was a telephone operator there, a German woman. Just, yes, you're right, he was there because I had lunch with him. Now, outside of the camp, they had these special quarters, even a swimming pool, and they lived quite well. She would ride around on a horse, and she had a relationship with one of the camp commandants there. Dr. Seidel was her friend. Anyway, Eichmann was there. And here's some of the brick barracks that we lived in. When we arrived, we were under the roof. It was very hot, lying on the floor, cement floors, no blanket, nothing. Well, yes, we had a blanket, but that was not enough, no mattress, nothing on the bare floor. I remember seeing sheets lying all over the place, and I looked at one of them underneath. There were bodies there. And many people died like flies. From the 140,000 people that were there from 41 to 45, 2/3 were shipped to the killing centers like Auschwitz. Close to a third died there. And we had 15,000 children. Perhaps 1%, maybe a little more, of the children, very few survived. I am a very lucky person to have survived. My best friend did not. Next. We pumped our water from polluted wells, and here these massive walls surrounding us. Next. When I arrived, there was an epidemic of scarlet fever, and almost all the children had it. And we were housed in some rooms, not even a real hospital. 2 children every bed, and my partner was a child, a baby from Luxembourg. And that bed was almost always wet. We couldn't help it. And we could not see our parents. Finally, I was very sick there. I was covered by lice and bed bugs, but everything was there. And, sores on my body. And finally, I was able to meet my parents again. We were very scared that we would be separated next. And I didn't understand the children talking. They were speaking Czech. I had no clue. I spoke German. I'm a village girl. And here we were housed in these old rotten houses for disabled war veterans. Now, most men, women, and children had to live separate, but still could see each other. And we were sort of living a kind of a dream, like, I wouldn't say dream, but we thought, well, all this will be over. We had no clue that the outcome would be that we will be killed. They kept it from us. But it was behind our minds, believe me, that something bad could still happen. It was bad enough there. People died all around us. So we went to our house. The disabled war veterans were allowed to live together, but in double, triple-deck bunk beds, very old, dilapidated areas, mice, rats, fleas, and bedbugs. Those were our companions. And 2 out of the 3 years we were in a tiny, tiny room without any heat, only heat in the next room, with a couple from Berlin. They had a daughter exactly my age. Her name was Ruth. And the father was half Jewish, the mother totally. Ruth was brought up as a devout Christian. And she always made fun of me because she came from Berlin, and I'm the village girl. I spoke village German. Next. And she was Berlin. Here's some of the pictures. These were taken in terrorism by the Russians, how we slept. Your little cubbyhole, that was your home. You ate, you slept, you had no table, no chair, nothing. Next. And here we pumped our water from polluted wells. Many people got typhus, which was rampant. Dysentery. We had no real bathrooms, latrines. One for the women was open to the elements, and one for the men. And absolutely no privacy. Maybe 2 showers a year with permission. The mothers took the children, and the men went separate. Here are the little carriages which brought the bread ration once a week, and my mother would cut into the bread, which was not good bread. It was filled up with all kinds of materials, and she would put a mark Monday to Tuesday, and if when you went into next day's portion, you had no more bread. Food was extremely important to have. They also brought the bodies to the crematory, these little wagons. Next. Standing in line 3 times a day to get your food. And in the morning, with your metal dishes, of course, a little kettle, and you got a black liquid coffee. This picture was actually taken after liberation because we couldn't leave. There was a typhus epidemic. And you used it to clean your clothes. It was like, tasted like soap. Lunch was maybe a potato, a little turnip, and some murky-looking soup, and the same again at night. Hunger was the main thing. Food was number one. Anything we could eat, anything. Next. What did we children do? Well, the adults had to do some slave labor. For instance, the women had to work at mica, splicing mica. It's kind of a stone, and that could be spliced, probably used for the war effort. And men worked too, but we children, we were useless to them. So we played around in the garbage dump, finding maybe a piece of a potato peeling, you still cut off a little, or a turnip, a rotten turnip, which you cut still a piece of thread, a little piece of paper, anything. Those were our games. Yes. And my mother worked in the so-called hospital for old women, actually just rooms. She never was a nurse before. And I remember going there one morning, and one of them felt something heavy on her shoulder, and she looked. A rat was sitting there. It was filthy, the place. Mice, rats, fleas, and bedbugs. And I remember I had my doll in a little box on top of my bunk bed. One morning, I saw this gray piece in there, shriveled up. I said, what is that? I didn't put it there. A mouse. Even a mouse could not find enough crumbs to survive. The worst day I remember happened in 1943. There was a count out. They knew exactly how many people were there, but they used that as a ruse to get us all out of the camp. Whoever was still there, anytime there were 40, 50,000 people, whether you were sick or not, we had to go into this ravine. It was raining, our feet sunk into the mud. And they were counting all day, beating us, no food, no bathroom, nothing was there. And late at night, order came from Berlin, everybody back, but men, women, and children separate, and we didn't want to do that. So we held on to each other like anything. We did not want to separate, because probably they had in mind, most likely, either to shoot us on that day, like in Babylon, or send us all to Auschwitz. And so there was a very bad assessment. His name was Heindel, the worst. They hung him after the war, the Russians did. And he beat my mother very badly with his rifle butt on that day. And it was an awful day. In fact, they were standing on the ravines there with their guns in their hand. They didn't shoot, but pointing at us. Everybody lost their hope. And even my father took my mother. She said, this is it. We're not going to make it. That's it. That's it. My father said, don't worry. You're going to ride in a car again. Again in a car. And you know, she did. School was absolutely forbidden, but some heroic teachers taught us from memory. You probably heard that the Czech children wrote poems and they made drawings, but that was only for the Czech children. The German children had nothing of that, none, almost nothing. And my mother knew somebody who knew a little English. I didn't know it. And she taught me this poem from memory. I had a little notebook my father found in the garbage, and a little stump of a pencil. And she dictated this to me, and I wrote it. I wish I were a little bird up in the bright blue sky that sings and flies just where you will. And no one asked him why. We wanted to fly away. And I think the penmanship of this little girl is better at that time than I write today. I only had 6 months of school. In 1944, the world kind of pushed the International Red Cross to see one of those camps. Is it true? People are being killed. And they chose Terezin or Theresienstadt to show what is happening, but they made a showpiece out of it. They painted houses and only let them see a certain area with signs to school, to playground, put on a children's opera for them, and football game. It was all nonsense to show them. In fact, I had a girlfriend who was one of the children selected to be one of the children to be shown. And she got some sardine sandwiches, and they were told to say, "Uncle Ram, again we have sardines today? We don't want them, we just want to play." And of course we didn't have sardine sandwiches, and it was all a lie. She remembers that. She told me she was one of them. I was not one of the lucky ones. They ate them down so quickly that they had to replenish them very often. And they also printed this bogus money, just monopoly money, with which you couldn't buy anything, except maybe mustard, which made you even more hungry. Next. And they went away, not seeing the crematory, where at least over 30,000 bodies had been buried. I mean, they had died. But, so they went away saying, yes, the people are putting on shows, and the children are eating sardine sandwiches. It can't be so bad, and they're not killing them. They didn't show the crematory. And as soon as they were away, almost the whole camp was sent to Auschwitz. For instance, next please. There were selections being made. There was a special selection of the veterans, the disabled war veterans, and they had to go to the commandantur, the head of the SS there, and to be looked at. And it was according to the alphabet. So my girlfriend's father was Abraham, and my father Auerbach, A. So they went together. And when he was looked at, he told him, I had to go to the lady with the typewriter, and she put a red sign around our name. She circled it. And so he said, Richard, did you go to that lady? He said, no. And what was the outcome? Within a week or so, they were in the transport to Auschwitz. It was willy-nilly. And he said, look, we'll see each other again. You just are coming a little while later. Of course, they all went straight, and they arrived straight in the gas chamber immediately. And there were only a few thousand people left in the camp because all had been taken away. I don't know, I must have a guardian angel above that I was saved. I don't know how, I have no clue. Pure love. If you would have asked anybody, how come you're alive? They will tell you it was pure love because you couldn't do anything, nothing. Finally, on May 8th, 1945, I was liberated by the Soviet army, but only a few thousand people were there. Some of the people from the death marches were sent also to Terezin. Probably, many more would have come there. The place was filling up with more people because Auschwitz was liberated in January, and whoever was still alive in the other camps, they tried to put them in ours because the gas chambers were being built, they were not used, they were not complete. That would have been the end because Eichmann really wanted to kill every Jew in Europe, every Jew. Who knows who the next person would have been killed, the next people. So here are some of the people from the death marches, and then we found out what happened to the others. They kept it a secret. In fact, there was even a special place, a family camp in Auschwitz, the Terezin family camp. They were told to send back postcards saying, oh, it's wonderful here, come and join us. And that was almost completely liquidated. and the barrack is no longer there, but they had a special place for the terrorism Jews in Auschwitz. Next. Finally, on May 8th, I remember it very well, they were burning the papers, some of the reports and documentation, and I heard a lot of noise. I climbed one of the wooden fences to see what's going on, because I heard the noise. These cars and trucks are moving out. And just as I did, I heard a tremendous explosion. I touched my head to see what had happened. And it turned out they were throwing in hand grenades. And I ran to my parents' side, and we found shelter in the cellar, which was really a hole in the ground, and somebody had a tiny candle. I never prayed so hard in my life. We have a special prayer, the Shema Yisrael, like you have the Our Father. I never lost my faith in God, ever. And somehow, 10 minutes to 8, something like that, somebody had a watch. He went up and he said, we are free, the Russians are here. But it wasn't like, oh, we are so happy now. We knew exactly that most of our families would never come back. So it was a very muted kind of joy. I remember the day very well, and we still could not go home because there was a tremendous typhus epidemic. They wrote about it even in the New York Times. Now, I will try to transgress a little bit. We went back to Germany, and of course nobody came back. Grandmother was gone a long time. And the house that belonged to us was filled to the top with people, but they made room for us in our house that they had taken. And a bus came actually a few weeks later after that to pick us up from terrorism and bring us to the displaced persons camp, and then we would make our way back to our homes, former homes. And I remember my mother went to the mayor of the town, and she looks on the floor. She says, my God, that's our Persian carpet. She hears a sound that sounded like our clock, and it was our clock. They had given everything to whoever, our stuff. And I started school again. I didn't know where I belonged. I never finished my first grade, second, third, fourth. And they put me in the fourth grade, a little fifth grade. I didn't know where I belonged. And we stayed in Germany about 9 months, and then came to America on the second displaced persons boat, Marine Perch, in '46 in May. And my mother had a brother in America who was fighting for the Americans. And he got out in time because of his wife, who had an uncle in America. She got out, the both of them. And then they got a job. I just want to tell you just a few minutes more of what happened after the war, which is very important too. My parents got a job as domestics. My mother became a maid, my father a butler. And I had a terrible cough. And the lady said, we have to take your daughter to the doctor. Well, it turned out there was a girl in the camp, in that compound where we lived. We were told, don't go near her. She's very sick. And it's catching. It's terrible. But we played with her, and I prayed to God that I had what she had, because she was getting a little bit more food. And I went to the doctor, and he said, you have to go immediately to the hospital. I had tuberculosis of both of my lungs, very, very sick. They put me in the hospital for 2 years, complete bed rest, and it didn't help. Finally, my parents got a job, another job, and finally an apartment in Brooklyn, third floor walk-up, and they took me home. Not well. And it was at that time, this was around I became here in '46. After '48, a new drug came, streptomycin, the first drug against tuberculosis. 2 very painful shots a day. It was still very experimental, but it saved my life. And I met actually the man who discovered that. And finally, at age 15, I started my first real school in Bushwick High School, which I finished in 3 years instead of 4. I went to summer school, not because I was a genius, because I worked hard. Then I wanted to start college, major in science. After a few weeks, I got sick again. Again, 2 shots of streptomycin a day, very painful. Some people lost their hearing even because of that drug. I didn't, thank God. And 26 pills a day. New drugs had been discovered, made me very sick, but I wanted to live again. 1 year in bed. I went back to the school a year later, and I finished a degree in chemistry, which I worked at as a chemist in research and clinical work for 38 years. Now, some years ago, I went back for the first time to Terezin. I didn't tell my parents. I was away for about 2 months. I went to Israel, some other tours, and I wanted to go back. Did I dream this? I must have dreamt it. But I wanted to see with adult eyes. Next. It's 60 kilometers north of Prague. I went to the same gate that I originally went through, but the Russians were at that time still there. They occupied the Czech Republic still. Next. And here's the house was still the same as I remembered it. Today, everything has been rebuilt. Everything. People are living there again. Very poor people. Next. And this is a train street from here. The tracks were actually built to go straight to Auschwitz from here. And this is also where the hand grenades were thrown in the camp. Next. And here's the crematory and the mayor of the town. That was quite a few years ago, my first time back. Next. Crematory ovens, 4 of them. And I was told they are the best preserved ones in all of Europe. And very famous people went there ready to pay their respects. Many students too. I was in Norway. They have it there as well. And we talked about it. In fact, I talked about it on a very big television station. The biggest talk show I was on. I had good fortune to do that. He wanted me. And we talked a little bit about that. Yeah, it is rising, and it comes from the fact that you have these people coming in and they don't want them. Because some of these people are trying to make what it was back home. Well, it's not back home. If you like it so much back home, you don't have to come to Norway, Sweden, or any of the countries. Europe is Europe. Each country has separate laws, separate ways of life, which if you want to go there, you have to abide by that. You can do in your home whatever you want. That's what we do in America. I mean, my next door neighbors are Muslims from Bangladesh, good friends of mine. They have a picture of the Kaaba, the holy place in Arabia, in their living room. The other side, they have religious objects. They're Hindu, very devout Hindus from Guyana. I'm very good friends with them. Then a Christian house. 4 of the major religions, wall to wall, living side by side. And we are good friends with each other. When you learn something about their culture, they're Americans, period. In the house, they can do whatever they want. If it's Ramadan, they can do their Ramadan. We have a Hanukkah, they do their Christmas, whatever it is. Or Diwali, which comes, there's always a holiday, all the religions. There's when it becomes dark, the lights and so forth. So you have Diwali, you have all different things, which you can do. We are free to do that. But the overall idea is we are all Americans first. We are Americans. It's very important to me. I love this country. I don't need any other citizenship. I don't. Why? It's good enough for me. Yes.
I wanted to know what was your favorite Holocaust movie, if you watched.
Holocaust movie?
Good question.
I really don't. I don't just see the movies. What is best? I mean, I think Schindler's List is pretty good. There's so many now, but I think that one gives a good picture of what it was like. I'm not from Poland, so I was in different camps. I mean, there are movies about, I had movies about myself too, by the way. So, yeah, good question. Yes?
The worst one I've seen on the Holocaust is Memory of the Camps.
I didn't see that one. I don't just go and see these movies.
Yeah.
I want to see happy movies. And I don't always think about this time. I mean, there were times when I dreamt about it. We're going to the East, which was scary. We didn't know what the East meant, but it meant something perhaps even worse. And so, you know, and today my parents never wanted to be interviewed, never. But I was interviewed, and in fact, that's how it all started. I wrote a song, lyrics to a song in '81 when we had the first world gathering of Jewish Holocaust survivors. The music was written by an Italian, she was born in America, Catholic woman, so it was quite interesting. And now we're talking about the UN. I did write a new song called Who Am I?, which will be presented by PS22, a very multicultural ethnic group, a school, a public school in Staten Island. I saw them on television at the Oscars, very poor school. And I said, I want that school to sing my song. And they did, and I presented to the United Nations, they would take them. So they will sing, and they're giving me a few minutes to speak to. But it's lyrics I wrote. Yeah. But I don't always dream about this anymore. I want to live, but I want to educate. Education is everything today. And what you are doing is a miracle. Kudos to you. You should get the Nobel Prize. I mean, look, he's made himself all harried. He barely sleeps. I'm going to be the Jewish mother here. He's vegetarian too, right? You know, that's okay. You can do what you want. That's okay. You can do whatever you want. I can even dye my hair black, you see. Yeah, the roots. I can be any color I want. That's my prerogative. I'm an American. I can do what I want. Especially color my hair. Okay, anybody else? Yes?
How'd you get through all of it?
You know, you have to. I guess I'm a strong kid. I always was. Not a kid anymore. But I really wanted to live. And I wanted just to be a regular teenager, you know. Just to blend in, to have friends, and go to school. That was so important to me. Because I was lonely. I mean, I didn't have friends, nothing. I've been being sick for so many years. I couldn't go to school. That's when I started to write. Because the only thing that the Board of Education gave me are books. And in the beginning, they gave me a homeschool teacher, but we lived on the third floor walk-up, and it was an elderly lady, and she couldn't make it many times. Cold water flat in Brooklyn. You don't know about those things anymore. It's so elegant in Brooklyn now, you can't even afford to live there. Yes?
I read once that people who were in the concentration camps at the time, their dreams tended to be nice dreams because that's the only way your brains could deal with the horror. Is that right?
Well, you know, you dreamt of things that you wanted to have. For instance, we kids would dream of the best cake, the best of everything, because someday it's going to happen. You cannot live without hope. You cannot live without hope. Yes. Anybody else? And, well, one more question? Oh, okay.
Yes, Inga, how do you think Brexit will affect Europe?
Oh, I gotta ask the politicians.
It's heavy.
I'm not good at this. Sorry. Yes. Yes.
If you wanted anybody to walk away with one thing today, just one thing to walk away, mull over throughout the night and carry with them tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, what would that be?
Well, I have two things. One is, my hope, my wish, and prayer is for every child to grow up in peace, without hunger and prejudice. My second thing is, if nobody has another question, is I would like you all to stand up and hold hands. Can you do that, the ones who can? Can you do that? All together, say in unison, Shalom. Shalom. I'm going to tell you what it means. It means peace, hello, and goodbye. We all want to live in peace together. That's my hope for the future and for today. Now you can say loud. 1, 2, 3. Shalom. Thank you.
People, if you'd like to buy a book and get it signed, come on up and see us. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Everybody say thank you, Mr. Little.
Thank you, Mr. Little. No. I can just sit. They're right here. No, it's Garrett.
We've been working on the Holocaust since right at the beginning of the year now. It's taken a lot of work, a lot of teamwork. It was really fun to get to do. We were so excited when we found a survivor to come, but sadly he passed away. But we're so happy that Angel was able to make it. We're really excited. It was really kind of sad when I was doing my board, because I didn't know, I knew about the Holocaust, but I didn't know really detailed. And when I started doing my board, I was learning about the striped prisoners' uniforms. It took a while with the research part. Finding pictures, accurate pictures, was really hard. We found a website that had really good pictures, and we did a lot of research. We studied it also as homework. We read a little book about it, and then we did answer some questions. I found out actually Ray, his wife was from North Adams, and they got married in North Adams, which is kind of cool because we're so close to North Adams. Boards. It took a lot of people to get a board. Everything had to be laid out perfectly. It had to look nice. We had to cut out everything, and that was a lot of work. With the cutters, it took almost all class to cut out all the pictures, all the text. And we actually had to take all the text out of this book and type it onto our computer so that we could print it and cut it off. And then we also had to back it and put our color for our board on the back of the text. So it took a lot of work just to get that part of the boards done. And then when we laid it out, we had to make sure everything was glued down, everything was straight. It took a lot of work.
It took us about 5 weeks to get it all done, and sometimes we felt stressed or rushed, but we felt like it was a pretty fun thing that we did. And we're surprised because some classes took 8 to 10 weeks, but we actually took half of that, so we're actually proud of that we did that.
Oh, wow.
Fischler, F-I-S-H-L-E-R.
And spell your first name?
R-A-Y-M-O-N-D.
And your name at birth?
Abraham. A-B-R-A-H-A-M. Fischler,
Mr. Little.
Your date of birth?
February 8, 1925.
And your place of birth?
Kazimierza Wielka in Poland. This is a small town about 42 miles from Krakow.
Could you spell the name of the town, please?
Molly?
Look at me. Go the bird.
There's sometimes
Did you check out the words before you got busy? Something did it.